Fort Jefferson preservation projects in the Dry Tortugas, home to the world's third largest emergent coral reef. Home to the nation's largest nesting colony of sooty terns. Home to the largest all-masonry fort in the United States. The Tortugas. The first recorded visit to the Tortugas was made by Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon in 1513, just 20 years after Columbus set foot in the New World. He called them Las Tortugas.
Go. You guys don't speak Spanish.
The turtles.
What's up?
The word dry.
Hey, white boy. Better learn Espanol, huh?
Located 70 miles west of Key West, Florida.
This ain't Branson, Missouri. You know what I'm talking about?
In the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, write this down.
Visitors come from all over the world to behold the natural and historical wonders in the sea.
Hey, white boy. My name's Tortuga. You know what that means?
If I'd have to guess, I'd say that's Spanish for
Fort Jefferson on Garden Key.
I love them.
So Fort Jefferson, which is the main cultural resource at Dry Tortugas National Park, was constructed over a 30-year period beginning in 1846.
Tortuga means turtle. That's me.
It wasn't until 1935 that the National Park Service began managing Fort Jefferson. In 1992, it was redesignated as Dry Tortugas National Park.
I take my time.
There are two ways to get to Dry Tortugas National Park, by plane or by boat. Those fortunate few who have the time and motivation to get to Dry Tortugas National Park are transported back in time.
So when they step off that boat, they are in awe almost at this visual environment. I mean, here you're standing in front of this massive masonry structure by beautiful, crystal clear blue water. There's birds flying, fish jumping. It's really an amazing place.
Get me 20 of them. I'm gonna put them all over my casa.
It took hundreds of laborers and $3.5 million, that's $500 million in today's dollars, for the 30-year project. And while Fort Jefferson's cannons never fired a shot in battle, the size and design of Fort Jefferson became a deterrent for every foreign aggressor that ever heard reports of this intimidating fortification.
But I always win.
It's hard to explain what a pivotal role forts like Fort Jefferson served in American history. The deterrence factor that a fort like Fort Jefferson served during the Civil War, during the Spanish-American War. This is a phenomenal location.
Fort Jefferson's design incorporated many of the latest technological advancements. Rainwater was collected and held in cisterns. Below each gunroom or casemate, and iron shutters were installed that were specifically designed to protect cannon crews by opening and closing automatically. It's impossible not to notice the estimated 16 million bricks that cover Fort Jefferson. But less noticeable are the iron shutters.
Obi-Wan was wise to hide it.
One of the key identifying historical features of Fort Jefferson, the wrought iron Totten shutter assemblies, embedded in every lower tier opening. The Totten shutters are named after their inventor, Joseph Gilbert Totten, an engineer in the United States Army. And while Fort Jefferson's cannons never fired a shot in battle, the Totten shutter assembly was a major technological feat of its day.
So the cannonball would fire out of the opening, the doors would recoil shut, the locking pins on the doors would slide up that beveled face and then drop into those two divots within the strike plate.
Fort Jefferson's cannons never fired a shot. Unfortunately, the Totten shutters built to protect the fort and the men firing the cannon are gradually destroying the fort. It was a major technological feat. Over the years, the wrought iron has expanded. The iron's expansion is much more powerful than the strength of the brick and mortar surrounding it. The result? Blowouts, a major technological feat of its day, causing bricks to fall from the fort walls into the moat below. It took hundreds of laborers and $3.5 million, that's $500 million in today's dollars, for the 30-year project. Some of the materials used to build Fort Jefferson came from the vicinity, including coral and sand. Other materials had a much longer journey. Natural cement used in the fort structure came from New York. The bricks were made in Pensacola, Florida, prior to the Civil War. After the war started, with Florida standing with the Confederacy, bricks had to be shipped from Maine. And while Fort Jefferson's cannons never fired a shot in battle,
we have this incredible key feature that is important to the history of the structure. It's important to military technology. This same feature is a main aspect that's creating a massive structural issue throughout time.
Park employees witnessed major sections of the facade falling into the water. They knew something had to be done. The question was, how would they repair the fort's walls? These types of repairs had never been attempted anywhere in the world. So in the 1980s, the National Park Service entered into uncharted territory. Some of the materials used to build Fort Jefferson came from the vicinity, including coral and sand. Other materials had a much longer journey. Natural cement used in the fort structure came from New York. The bricks were made in Pensacola, Florida, prior to the Civil War. After the war started, with Florida standing with the Confederacy, bricks had to be shipped from Maine. Enola Contracting Services employed 15 men who worked 12 hours a day for 21 days straight. After 3 weeks of hard work, they would fly home for a week's rest before starting the cycle again. They worked this schedule from November to June for 4 years.
And yet we have incredible masonry going on in here, and guys that really put some time and effort and were showing off their craftsmanship. I think you'll see that sense of pride carrying over to the masons that are working on this project today.
We spend hours surveying each area, marking brick, just figuring out which ones come out, which ones stay, and then it takes twice as long because we could just wipe this whole wall out.
I think the people that worked on this fort in original construction were very proud of this massive military fort from the 19th century in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Sanded masonry out here, it's everything else that's involved. It's the distance from land, it's the difference from a city, how we have to get everything out here.
The estimated 16 million bricks that cover Fort Jefferson.
The shifts we have to work, the getting manpower out here, that doubles the workload of the job.
The preservation of Fort Jefferson.
Aside from this, the park is actually doing a lot of other preservation projects. Some highlights of that are we recently mounted one of the original 15-inch Rodman cannons on a historically accurate carriage, which is located on the terraplane level of the fort, and that has truly become a highlight of the park experience.
The Rodman cannon at Fort Jefferson were manufactured in 1871 and were installed on top of the fort in 1872 and 1873. In 1900, Fort Jefferson's armaments were sold for scrap. The 15-inch Rodman fired a solid shot that weighed 450 pounds.
We have 6 of them here at Fort Jefferson.
Installed along with the Rodman cannon were smaller 10-inch Parrott guns, manufactured in 1864 and 1865.
Of the 13 surviving 10-inch Parrotts, we have 4.
In 1900, Fort Jefferson's armaments were sold for scrap. All of the cannons, their carriages, the cannonballs, and tons of equipment were sold, including the 10 largest cannons still present at the fort.
Fortunately for us, they couldn't get these large guns down from the top of the fort. Unfortunately, they were able to get the carriages, so the cannon actually lay in the sandy, salty terraplane for over 100 years.
The harsh environment of the Dry Tortugas took a toll on the remaining cannon. Large areas of corrosion formed in areas where the cannon sat in contact with sand. The overwhelming size of the cannon, a 15-inch Rodman cannon weighs 25 tons, in such a remote location on top of Fort Jefferson, prevented any real progress on cannon preservation until the 1980s. Help came from the 482nd Civil Engineer Squadron stationed at Homestead Air Reserve Base, who devised a way to lift the huge guns out of the sand and up onto blocks.
Put out a request for proposal, and that was awarded to Tuckerbrook Conservation out of Maine, and their proposal was innovative, and they are the ones that really seem to understand it.
Standard methods of cannon conservation were not feasible in this remote location, with limited electricity, water, housing, and personnel. Adding to the difficulty was the fact that these 25-ton cannon sat on the terraplane at the top of the fort.
You start to think the way NASA thinks. So there's a lot of redundancy. You bring redundancy, not one but two. Redundancy of something you need. You try to think ahead, and then when it's time, they change out the redundancy.
The conservation treatment of the cannon ensures their long-term preservation, but it does little to help visitors understand how these guns worked or their role in defending the Gulf. That part of the story is hard to understand.
To be able to remount one of these guns for the first time in 110 years, visitors could come out here and see what one of these large guns looks like on a carriage.
The technical challenges to mounting one of the 25-ton Rodman guns were immense. In the end, more than 50 people were involved in the mounting project in one way or another. It took hundreds of laborers for the 30-year project. Having a carriage made was the easy part. However, the original Rodman gun platforms at Fort Jefferson were only temporary platforms that didn't survive intact, and there were no historical drawings or photographs of them known to exist. Historically, the platform would have been created first and then the gun brought to the top of the fort. Perhaps the greatest challenge, however, was how to lift the cannon. Because of Fort Jefferson's location and structural design, using a modern crane was not an option.
To roll, we thought that was a little scary, so we actually used modern machine removers. We did exactly what they did in the Civil War.
Records indicate that it took 50 privates and 2 officers working in 2 teams to lift a 25-ton Rodman cannon up to the top of the fort. Once there, a team of 12 was needed to move the gun into position. Only 2 men were needed to pull the cannon onto the platform for lifting. The cannon then needed to be lifted and held 7.5 feet in the air so that the carriage could be constructed underneath it. Historically, installing the cannon on their carriages was always difficult and dangerous work. The Fort Jefferson guns were mounted in 1873. In the late 1870s, a man named Theodore Laidley invented a gun lift to aid in mounting and dismounting 15-inch Rodman guns. The Fort Jefferson guns were mounted in 1873.
So we had an engineered design following the Laidley gun lift.
It presented the safest option for doing the work.
We lifted it with Dacron lifting slings. They would have lifted it with chains and hydraulic jacks. We were surprised to find that during the Civil War that they actually used hydraulic jacks to move these things.
The carriage is constructed from stainless steel
which was originally in wood,
and assembled it under the cannon. Once the carriage was complete, the cannon was gently lowered. The military deterrent that the guns represented is visible as the mounted Rodman guns aim over the fort's walls, a warning to approaching ships, which today carry visitors.
Now, having just this one gun mounted, people come up and suddenly they get it. They really understand what it was about, how it was meant to be used there, about what it took to man that gun, to service the gun, how far it could shoot. Whereas before, they're asking all kinds of questions. It was very much an inanimate object. Now, through the mounting process, they really get it.